Is it live?
It's live.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Today we are doing comfort food and a fall cocktail featuring some apple cider and some rye and some deadly fireball. Gonna wait a couple of minutes for everybody to get in, especially my sister Nancy, because for those of you joining us the first time, Nancy decided at the beginning of quarantine back in March that I needed to teach her how to cook online since I was doing it by phone. And now we are in, I don't know, demo 15 or 16 or whatever. And I've taught her some pretty good stuff, and we have some people that follow along to learn new technique and new recipes each time. So I'm really excited that the audience is growing and that people are actually cooking at home instead of ordering takeout all the time. So I'm really excited to help you out with that. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, this is a real house. This is my real kitchen. I have real dogs who may or may not bark at any given time for no reason at all. So we try to keep the noise to a minimum. We've shut off things that make a lot of white noise so that you can hear me well, because my kitchen is filled with hard surfaces, so there's a little bit of an echo every now and then. So how are we doing, babe? My handsome husband is...
Karen Shalita's on.
Great.
Think it's your mom.
Hi, Mom.
I can't see. It's not showing me on here anymore how everybody who's on.
Are you signed in as you, or are you signed in?
You're...
Okay.
No, I know.
Because my husband's an admin on the Good for Spooning page, so sometimes when you get a response, it's me most of the time, but when we're doing the live demos, any written responses are going to be by my husband. So for those of you who want to see the other demos that have been done, you can go to my YouTube channel. It's Good for Spooning, just like it is on Facebook and Instagram, and I encourage you to subscribe, because what happens when I post a new video up, you will get a little email that says Good for Spooning posted a new video. That way you'll know that the newest recipe is up in case you missed it on Facebook, and you will be able to watch it at your leisure whenever it is convenient for you.
So we're up to 7.
Okay, we're gonna get started with the cocktail. I am not a sweet cocktail person. Oh, I forgot the ginger beer. I'm gonna have to go get it. I'll get it. But I really like fall flavors. I especially like cinnamon and clove and nutmeg. And fireball by itself is brutal. But when you mix it into a cocktail, it gives that sweet, cinnamony, spicy taste that you love. So we are going to be working with that today. And some ginger beer for a little bit of extra spice and some fresh apple cider. So let me go get that ginger beer that I forgot to get out, because I can't remember everything all the time.
And while she's doing that, I'm going to make the pitch for the latest Notebrow creation. I am sipping a pint of Notebrow Blueberry Porter. So, cheers.
My husband did not particularly care for the sweetness of this cocktail, but it's a great punch bowl option, because you can make this in a big batch, put it in your punch bowl, and then add a combination of ginger beer and club soda, so that it's not too sweet, but it still get all those great fall flavors. And yes, Mom, I put a headband on because I know you hate my hair and my face. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put some ice in our cocktail shaker. Now, in this case, the term shaker is a misnomer, because we're not gonna shake it, we're gonna stir, stir, stir. So we are going to add equal parts rye and fireball. Now you can use any cinnamon whiskey you like. You can use any rye that you like. This Knob Creek happens to be open, so that's what I'm using. And I've got my little, here we go. Got my little shot glass. And we're gonna do equal parts. As on your instruction sheet, I told you it's 2 ounces of each for 2 cocktails. Since I'm only making 1, I'm doing less than that, obviously. Where's my marker? Oh, here we go. And then double the amount of apple cider. And I like to shake the cider, especially if you're getting a nice unfiltered one, because all the particulates will settle down at the bottom. And we don't want that.
And who doesn't like particulates?
You want it mixed in. Okay.
Chunky is better.
Then we're just going to take our cocktail spoon, and any long spoon or spatula that will fit in your glass is perfect. And you're just going to stir it around to get everything really cold. Now you could shake this, but for some of you who are novice cocktail makers, I didn't want you to explode it all over your kitchen or break your glass or whatever. So we're just going to do it the easy way. And your glass should be cold. Like when you touch your cocktail shaker, it should be so cold it's hard to hang on to. That's how you know all your ingredients are cold. Okay, so I've got my little, this actually is a pint glass from Negro Modelo, but it's so Halloweenish, I thought it was perfect for today. We're gonna put ice into our cocktail glass.
Nice ice bucket.
Nice ice bucket that my friend Lynn made for me. It's actually a flower pot. It's super cute. Okay, so now we're gonna take our strainer, and if you don't have a strainer, you can use the back of your spoon. It'll work just as well. But I actually have a cocktail strainer. We're gonna fill our glass about 2/3 full. And I'm using Fever Tree ginger beer. There's a lot of great ones out there. Fee Brothers, there's so many.
Bundaberg.
Bundaberg is a great one. Just find one that you like. This is the one that we happen to have in the house. So this is what we're using today. And you might just want to give your cocktail just a little stir to incorporate that ginger beer down. Oh man. It's spicy, it's sweet. It tastes like all the things you love about fall, all in one glass. So we've got our cocktail done, and now we're gonna get started making our soup.
I'm going to add my cocktail tip. So if any of you make the cocktail, but it seems to be a little too sweet for you, as it was for me, what I did was I cut in a bit of club soda.
Yeah.
So it still has that carbonation, but it cuts down on the sweetness.
Okay, so get your big heavy bottom stock pot or whatever you're going to be making your soup in on your burner and get it ready to go, because this recipe, I call it cheater because you start with a lot of canned ingredients. So it's great for people who are on lockdown from a hurricane, or you haven't been able to get to the grocery store. So these are, you know, to me, tomatoes and V8 are kind of pantry staples for me. I'm going to be using my own chicken stock that I've made, but of course canned works in this preparation as well. So really, like almost everything is canned, except for your dairy products. Now, if you are choosing to do the vegan options, I sent you the vegan options for the soup. There really aren't vegan options for this particular grilled cheese sandwich, and I am unfamiliar working with vegan cheese. I don't know that I'm really fond of the way it melts or doesn't melt in this case. So if you want to attempt a grilled cheese with a vegan cheese substitute, go for it. But ours has bacon in it, and that is not a vegan option. So get your cans open. I've started to heat up my pan. And this moves along pretty quickly at the beginning. And while our soup is simmering, we're going to make our grilled cheese. We're going to assemble and make our grilled cheese sandwich. So the ingredients that I gave you for the grilled cheese sandwich don't act like they should go together, but trust me, they do. So let's talk a little bit about garlic, because when I asked you guys for ideas on what you would like to see me do, a few people said that they'd really like to know more about culinary terms and how to shop for stuff that, you know, when you're in the produce department. And I said, okay, I can incorporate those ideas into the demos that I'm already doing. So I'm going to talk to you about garlic a little bit today. So garlic, when you buy it, This is a head or a bulb of garlic. This is a clove of garlic, all right? Now, as I've mentioned on previous demos, the more you process garlic, the stronger and more pungent the flavor is going to be. Because as you crush it or mash it or turn it into a paste or slice it, you are releasing a bunch of the oils that are trapped inside individual little garlic cells. So if you want a mild garlic flavor, slice it. If you really want a pow of garlic like I do, we're gonna crush it. When you shop for garlic, you should make sure that and I've already taken off the outside of this, but the outside paper should be nice and tight. You should not see any green sprouts growing out of it, because that means it's old and the cloves themselves are going to be kind of desiccated and dry because the green part is drawing from it. Okay, my pan is warm. I need my stick of butter. We're going to put the stick of butter right into the pan and let it melt. My pan is over medium-high heat. And we're going to start looking at this garlic. So to peel your garlic, you just want to press down on it with your hand, and the skin will come right out. Now, I told you to have 2 to 3. You could use 2 to 5. Depends on how big your garlic cloves are and how much garlic flavor you want in your final dish. Since we happen to like garlic, I always...
And if you don't, we can't be friends.
Yeah. I happen to like garlic quite a bit, so I always choose a couple of really good sized ones. And then I'm going to use my unitasker. It's really only good for one thing, and that's mashing this garlic up into a paste.
But it does it so well.
It does it so well and so quickly. So if you have a garlic press, you should be pressing that garlic. I am going to be using this. And we're going to put the garlic right into the pan. If your butter browns a little bit, it's fine, because it's just going to add another level of flavor. Do not allow it to get black, of course. That would be bad. Okay. Mine smells great already. So now we're going to start putting in our tomatoes. Now, I chose crushed tomatoes, and I suggested that you do the same. If by some happenstance you have whole tomatoes or diced tomatoes, don't worry, it'll be fine. Because you're going to hit it with that blender, and it's going to break everything up anyway. And now we're going to add in our V8. Now this is like a secret ingredient because it's not just tomato. There's so much more in there. It's kind of like having a liquefied mirepoix, because there's carrot in there, there's celery in there, you know, there's onion in there. So you've got all this stuff going in without you having to do all the work.
What's a mirepoix, Leanne?
A mirepoix.
For those of us who don't speak fucking French.
A mirepoix is a classic 3 ingredients that is the basis of almost all French cooking. It is 2 parts onion, 1 part celery, 1 part carrot. And they're all cut at about the same size, depending on the dish you're using. If it's going to end up being a garnish, of course you're going to have it very finely diced. But if you're doing a soup or a stew, and you're going to drain them out, it can be a little bit bigger, it's fine. So now we're going to add in our basil. Now, the dried basil is key here, because fresh basil is going to get added at the end. When you're working with fresh herbs, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, the longer you cook fresh herbs, the less taste they have, because what you really want is the pop. And you get that from the fresh herbs at the very end of cooking. So we're going to be adding some chiffonade basil when it's almost done, and then we're going to use more as a garnish. So take your dry basil and put it in your hand. I told you to use 3 tablespoons. You could go a little more, a little less. It's entirely up to you. Put it in your hand, and because the oils that make basil taste like basil are trapped inside these dry leaves, you're gonna crush it with your hands.
Well, just as an aside, Chef Daniel is watching from Serbia.
Oh, hey Dan, how are ya? Okay, so smell your hands now. They smell so good. So when you crush the herbs in your hand, you are releasing those oils and you're allowing more of the flavor to permeate into whatever liquid you have added them to. And that's true if you're topping a pizza because they're going to blend with the oils from the cheese. It's true if you're making tomato sauce or bolognese. Doesn't matter because you want to really get the oils released. Okay, so now here's the thing about the chicken stock. Take your chicken stock, pour a little bit into each can, and swirl it around so you get all the tomato remnants out. And I'm just going to pour it from one to the other. Because see, now look, I have hardly any tomato left in there without having to scrape. Swirl, swirl, swirl. Now this recipe was taught to me by my friend Doreen in Texas years ago. And there's a place called Le Madeleine, which is a quasi-French bistro chain.
Oh.
But they make a really great tomato basil soup, and this is kind of like a riff on theirs. And so now I'm going to pour in a little bit more chicken stock. Or if you're using vegetable stock, you know, the same thing. This makes a good amount of soup, okay? So you're going to have leftovers, and you're going to thank me later for it. Because the more it sits, the more the flavors meld, the flavors intensify, and they get really happy.
2-3 days, this is like even better.
Ridiculous, yeah, it's so good. So when you're looking at your soup, and it's gonna be, I can't show it to you because I'm not gonna lift this and try and dump it all over the kitchen counter, but you should be seeing in your pan right now, beautiful flecks of basil throughout your red soup. If you think it's too thick, add a little bit more chicken stock. If it's too thin, don't worry because you're going to have the opportunity to let some of it evaporate.
Yeah, you can cook it down as long as you need to.
Right. So my pan is over medium high. I'm going to drop it down to medium. I'm going to use my
Karen Shalita wants to know if it's okay to freeze it.
Yes, as long as you don't add the cream. So if you were going to make this and freeze part of it, I would say make the soup right up until we add our dairy. Take out what you want to freeze, take out the portion that you want to freeze, and then add your dairy in for service. So when you thaw it out, you would do the same thing. You're going to heat it up on the stove, add your dairy to serve, and you're good to go. It's a great question, Karen. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to work on our grilled cheese sandwiches. Now, I had a sandwich similar to this at a restaurant here in town called Aces and Ales. It's a great beer-centric bar. They have 50 taps. They're all unique. They're constantly changing.
There's no Bud Miller Coors on tap.
You never know what you're going to get when you go in there. It's going to be amazing. So I kind of tweaked their recipe a little bit, but I got the idea from them. So let's talk about our apples first. I chose Granny Smith for a couple of different reasons. First of all, they're super tangy. So when you've got all the richness of the bacon and the cheese in there, the apple is going to kind of give you another level of deliciousness that is a completely different, it's not sweet. It's got a little bite to it. Also, they're very firm and crunchy, so you're going to get another level of texture in your sandwich. If you tried to do this with a Gala or a Jonathan, the flavors would be slightly different and it would be fine, but you're not going to get the crunch because these take a while to break down and we want to keep that crunch. So also when shopping for apples, I want to show you something, and I'm going to try and get really close to the screen with this. All right, when you look at the bottom of an apple, you see how tight that is? Does it look tight, babe? Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, when you see the bottom,
angle.
The The bottom of the apple.
You were holding it so it was glaring.
Oh, sorry. You should look for it to be super tight, okay? There should not be a hole there. If there's a hole there, it means the apple is old, it has been in cold storage for a really long time, or some other undesirable situation, either heated and cooled or whatever. Because when it's tight like this, you're gonna have a nice, juicy, crisp apple. If you've got a hole in there, chances are it's gonna be mealy and flavorless, and you're gonna be really unhappy. And so we don't want that. Okay, so I want to get our aioli started.
I like my Granny Smith sliced up with peanut butter, but
I
that's
like it
just
with
me.
almond butter, so yeah, you could do that too. All right, so I told you to have some mayonnaise, and I forgot to tell you to have a small bowl to put it in, but I figured you guys were smart enough to figure that part out. And we're gonna add some garlic and some Parmesan cheese to it, because we're gonna make like a really quick cheater aioli. Now, true aioli, which I almost never make, you start with egg yolk and you basically make your own mayonnaise, and then add in your garlic and whatever other seasonings you want to use. I am too lazy to make my own aioli, so I start with good old Hellmann's mayonnaise. If it's good enough for Hubert Keller, it's good enough for me. So we're going to add in a couple of cloves of garlic to our mayonnaise, and we want it really well processed, because you don't want great big honking chunks of garlic in your aioli. You want it kind of smooth. So I'm gonna hit it again with my unitasker. And for those of you who've never seen me use this before, you can get it on Amazon. It's about $12.
I don't think it was that much.
And I'm gonna run it through one more time because I want it really well processed. We're gonna pop that right into the mayonnaise. And I told you to have some very finely grated Parmesan cheese. So I'm actually using Parmesan cheese that came with our takeout pizza from Metro, because it was already super fine grated. I didn't need it for my pizza, and I didn't want to let it go to waste. So I'm adding a couple.
Shout out to Metro Pizza and Chris Decker.
Shout out to pizza. And I didn't want to let it go to waste, and because it's a reliable, like, awesome pizzeria, I know that it's real Parmesan and that it's not crap. So I wasn't worried about it not melting or not doing what I wanted it to do. So when you mix your parm in, you should see little pieces of garlic in the texture and little pieces of cheese in the texture. It's not supposed to be completely smooth, but it should be relatively smooth, because we're going to put this on the outside of our sandwich instead of butter. Okay. Oh, my bacon's in the fridge. Good man. I'm so out of it today, you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm really scattered. Okay.
Walter wants to know, how much mayo should we use?
I think I told you on the sheet about a quarter of a cup for 2 sandwiches, because you're going to want like a tablespoon on each side, give or take. I'll step on that knife, so let me just grab that. Now the bacon that I'm using, I told you to pre-cook it, and Sister Nancy actually emailed me or texted me and said, "Are we cooking this bacon?" And cut it into pieces that are going to fit on your sandwich. Now I like my bacon like just this side of burnt, like super crispy. Cook it however you like. But this bacon actually happens to be from a slab that I cured and smoked myself. So it's irregular cuts, because my knife skills are not 100% on making everything uniform. Stir your soup if you see it start to bubble. And if it's bubbling vigorously, turn it down, because you should be having it at a simmer. And a simmer means that the bubbles are just barely breaking the top. A boil is fast action. You just want a little simmer, like this, okay? All right, so I've got my bacon. let's talk about cheese. I've got you with 3 different cheeses today. The Havarti that we purchased is already sliced, and we're going to use that. I told you to get some Gruyere, which is going to add a nutty, sharp taste to it, and then some sharp white cheddar, because it's creamy and sharp at the same time. Now, Havarti is very creamy, and it's very mild and smooth.
And it melts like crazy.
Yeah, and when it melts, it makes like the best texture. So we've got some Havarti here. And I'm just gonna make one sandwich for John and I to share. So I only need 2 slices, 1 for each side of the bread. And then we're gonna grate up our cheese. So again, I'm using a microplane grater because I like them. They're stainless steel, the blades are made in the US, and they stay sharp forever. Put my cocktail back here, which is stupid. I should have it right next to me. Okay.
Your sister Nancy is asking, did we add the V8?
Yes, you missed that, sis. Right after the tomatoes.
But what's funny is Walt already asked if we added the V8, and I replied to him.
Okay.
So your sister's not paying attention. She's just along for the ride.
She's along for the ride. So one of the great things about these little cooking demos is that you can watch now and cook later. You can cook with me, which is why I provide you the shopping list in advance. And you can revisit them whenever you want. So you can cook as many times or as few as you like. I said I've had people tell me that they've watched the Croque Madame demo, which was the very first one that we did, a couple of different times because they were afraid to try the bechamel, and it gave them the confidence to do it. So I've got a nice little pile of cheese. This is about 1.5 ounces, 2 ounces. I probably won't use all of it. And then here is our cheddar, which is delicious. Okay, so I've got Havarti, white cheddar, and Gruyere. So now we've got our bacon ready to go. Now we've got to get our green apples. I don't know about where you guys live, but there's a lot of shit flying around in the air here, and it's driving my allergies nuts. Okay, so I'm going to use this little mat on top of my cutting board for a very important reason. I did my garlic on here. I don't want my green apple to taste like garlic. Okay?
I don't mind.
So, cut your apple from top to bottom. Okay? I'm trying to do this so you can see it. And then cut your apple again in half so that your core is exposed. You're going to turn it on its side so that the flat side is down against the cutting board. And you're just going to cut that core out at an angle. So you're going to end up with a piece that looks like this. Okay? Now, in my house, the cores do not go to waste because our dogs love them. So these will be treats for them later. Okay. Take your apple, turn it cut side down onto the board, and using your knife, cut yourself very nice, thin slices of apple.
You want them to be wafer thin.
No, not quite wafer thin, but you don't want great big honking pieces. Like this one's actually a little too thin. This one's perfect. So maybe a little less than 1/8 of an inch. And you're only going to really need 1/4 of an apple.
So perhaps only 1/9 or 1/10 of an inch.
You're only going to need 1/4 of an apple for one sandwich. And that's even, you're not even going to use all of it. So when it gets down to a point where you might feel like a little nervous about putting your fingers near it, and it's gone. All right, so now we're going to assemble our sandwich. I'm using Texas toast today because I had it in the refrigerator. You could use thick sliced brioche. You could use whole grain bread, whatever you like. But I think that a thick piece of bread is definitely the way to go. This one's a little mashed. Here we go. Okay, so you see these nice thick pieces of bread. All right, you want to put your pan on, and you want it on low. So the key here is this. You cook grilled cheese over low heat, because if you do it over high heat, your bread is going to be cooked and your cheese is not going to be melted. Okay? So, I like to build my sandwich in stages. So I'm going to butter my bread with the aioli.
You're going to coat.
I'm going to coat it and put it into the pan. And then I'm going to put in a slice of Havarti. Now, if your cheese looks like it's too big for your bread, just break it in half and let it overlap a little bit in the middle. Take half of your cheddar and sprinkle that on. Take half of your Gruyere and sprinkle that on. So it should look like this at this point.
You're too low. There you go.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to put on our bacon. And again, this is all up to you. Put as much or as little bacon on your sandwich as you like. I happen to adore bacon. So I'm going to have 4 half slices going across my sandwich. And then I'm going to take my green apple pieces, and you can lay them however you want. I like them to overlap just a little bit so that it's completely covering the bacon. Apparently John wants bacon too.
Well, you were being selfish.
I was being selfish. So I used 8 slices of apple on my sandwich. And now we're going to do the cheese in reverse. So we're going to put our Gruyere close to the apple. And then we're going to put a little bit of cheddar. And if it gets into the bottom of the pan, don't worry about it. It's fine. It'll come right out. And then our Havarti. Now the pan I'm using is a black carbon or blue carbon steel pan from Made In. It's made right in the United States. Their products are amazing. And this one is one of those things you treat it like cast iron. So you don't put soap in it, frequently, use a little bit of soap when it's super greasy. And you season it like you would cast iron. And it thrives at high heat, but we don't need high heat for this particular recipe. So, again, coating the outside of my sandwich and just setting it on top. Okay, now basically what we do is we wait. So this is a great opportunity for you to ask me questions or for you to catch up with me with the recipe, because I have been told that I move too fast frequently. And I'm aware of that, and I try to slow down. I've also been talking with Nancy and some other folks on what recipes that they would like to learn. And I thought I was going to teach you guys how to do a classic bolognese. But when I actually started doing the recipe trial for it, it takes way too long. Way too long. So I won't be doing that as a demo. I might write the recipe out for you so that you can do it on your own. I actually taught my brother how to do it.
It's the actual cooking that takes the time.
It's the cooking that takes the time.
So you can actually do the demo and then have some of it prepared ahead of time, or record the prep before and
maybe
post it, and then go live making the pasta, etc., making the meal.
Maybe. I don't know. I'll try to figure it out, because a classic bolognese is not chopped meat thrown into tomato sauce. It's a lot more complicated than that. So let's talk about our basil, because we're gonna do some chiffonade, which is fancy for strips. And this basil, it's not perfect. You see that there's some darker spots on it because it's getting later in the season and it doesn't hold up as well as it used to. But that's okay because we're gonna mix it right in, so it's gonna be fun. So you want to make a stack of leaves, and you're going to roll it into a joint or a cigarette. Take the stems off the end and just very carefully, very fine strips.
Your sister Nancy cut herself so Walt's cooking.
Oh, Jesus.
I told her she needed stitches. Come on over.
Yeah. Okay, so remember the last time I told you if you were storing your basil in the refrigerator, you were a savage? This is actually basil that I got from the co-op, that I trimmed the roots, trimmed the stems off with the leaves, and shoved them into the water. And this is the root bundle that it's growing. So, I mean, it's really easy. It allows you to always have fresh basil available. So we're just gonna pop off some leaves, and it's getting toward the end of the season, so it's not as pretty as it is during the heat of the summer, but it's still very functional. It's still very flavorful. And once it hits the soup, it's gonna wilt a little bit anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
And if you got purple basil, that's even prettier.
Oh yeah, purple basil is so pretty. I couldn't get it to root though, for whatever reason. It just didn't want to. It would turn rotten before it rooted.
Rotten, I say rotten.
Rotten, I say rotten.
Ixnay on the Ottenram.
For those of you who are unfamiliar, that's a line from Young Frankenstein. One of my all-time favorite
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. One of my all-time favorite movies. So this morning, I took some basil, because I have a lot of it, and I whipped together a really quick pesto. So pesto is nothing more than herbs, in this case basil, that are blitzed in a food processor with other ingredients. And in this case, I used pinoli nuts or pine nuts and garlic and olive oil. That's it. Oh, and I put Parmesan cheese in. So you can do it without the Parmesan cheese and make it vegan, because we are not. We added the parm, of course. Parmesan cheese adds a level of umami and that fifth, or that sixth taste that is so elusive and hard to define, but Parmesan cheese has it. And now if you had a rind of Parmesan cheese, you could throw that in your soup and it would totally not suck. It would be a really good thing. So my soup is
always save your rinds, and you can throw them in your red sauce too.
You can throw them in red sauces, you can throw them in braises, you can do whatever. So I'm going to take some of my chiffonade basil and throw it in. And I'm going to save the rest for the garnish. Now the thing about, like I said, we're about halfway done with this recipe. Pretty much what you're going to get out of throwing the chiffonade in there now is more aroma than flavor, because the dried basil will give it a ton of flavor. So let's check on our grilled cheese and see how it's doing. Now, it's like I said, it should be on low heat. So it should be, oh, mine looks beautiful. I got mayonnaise on my hand. And you want to push it down. Now, do not, under any circumstances, cover your grilled cheese sandwich. You will end up with soggy bread. It is better to cook on a very low heat for a longer period of time so that everything heats all the way through than it is to rush it along. Same thing with French toast. You don't rush it, because then you end up with a cooked outside and raw in the middle. And I wish I could get this actually lower, but this is as low as this one goes. I might switch. Might switch burners. But yeah, so my my Parmesan crust is looking really
Karen-
tasty.
Karen Shalita wants you to repeat what goes in pesto.
What goes in pesto? So it's herbs, whatever herbs. You could do it with arugula, you could do it with basil. In this case, we did
You
it
can
with
do
basil.
it with kale.
You can do it with kale if you want to. In my case, I used pine nuts, but you could use arugula and walnuts. You could use arugula and almond, kale, and whatever. But there should be a nut component, not just for the flavor, but for the oil that it imparts. You want olive oil to keep it moving throughout the bowl. And I use Parmesan cheese because I like that kick from it. There's a lot of great recipes for alteration online. You could type in arugula pesto and come up with 14 different, recipes right on the front page. Same with basil pesto. So it's really, pesto is, traditionally for me, it was always a basil product, but it has evolved as more like a sauce technique, and everything is raw. There is nothing cooked in it. So it's not like you have to, you could toast your nuts, but you don't have to. But what I did was everything that went into my pesto today was raw. And so this is what...
I like mine on a silver platter.
This is what it looks like. And it's a little oxidized because when air touches the garlic and the basil oils, it turns a little brown. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to take a little bit and it'll give me an opportunity to taste the soup at the same time. I don't know about you guys, but mine tastes really good. So the pesto that I just threw in, I was just going to add a little bit more basil flavor and a little bit of olive oil, smoothness. My sandwich is looking good. So what I started to say was my Parmesan aioli, it crusted really nicely. And when you flip it, it doesn't seem like it's cooked because it feels soft, but as it cools down and the structures of the cheese cool, they get a little crispier. So it's good. Now, you can use this as a garnish, and I'm actually going to use a little bit as a garnish on mine, but you don't have to. If you taste your soup and it tastes a little anemic, like the tomato taste isn't intense enough, you can cook it down a little bit more. You can add a tablespoon or so of tomato paste. I prefer, in this particular instance, the ones that come in the squeeze tube. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It looks like this. This one happens to be Oro de Palma brand. Oro de Palma brand. And it comes in a tube like this, and like toothpaste, like old school metal toothpaste tube. And you can squeeze just a tablespoon or so in and let it cook. It'll help intensify the tomato flavor. Depending on what kind of tomatoes you used. When I can my own tomatoes, they don't have the same intensity of flavor as the ones that you can buy in the store. So I use my canned tomatoes for something else. I've tried making my tomato soup with it, and it's just kind of anemic. So I use my canned tomatoes for something else, the ones that I can. This brand of tomatoes happens to be Cento or Cento, however you want to pronounce it. Looks like this. It's a very Italian brand that I grew up with. Hunt's makes a great tomato product, as does Contadina. And like I said, if you accidentally bought diced or whole tomatoes, don't worry. You should just be breaking them up with a spoon while you're stirring, because we're going to blitz it with the food processor, with the hand blender in a minute. Now, if you do not have a hand blender and you're using a regular blender, you're going to probably have to do this in batches, because I don't know anybody whose blender is big enough to hold all of this. So get your blender ready if you're using a blender. Get your hand blender ready if that's what you're going to use. I'm going to check on my sandwich again. So my Parmesan is a little sticky on the bottom, and since I got cheese splattered across the sandwich, because can you see how pretty mine looks? Can you see it?
Yep.
And I just flipped it over again. It's not going to hurt anything to stay in there for a couple extra minutes. Just watch it, make sure it doesn't burn. All right, so hand blenders come in a lot of different sizes. This one happens to be a Cuisinart. I gave you guys a link to purchase it if you wanted to have the same one as me. Mine has a low and high on it. When you use a hand blender, be sure to submerge it before you turn it on. If you turn it on up here and then put it in, you will have a volcano.
I do not
soup.
want tomato soup on me.
We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem.
Well, we only own like 3 of them. Is
This
it
doesn't
turning?
sound right.
What, is it moving?
Nope.
Then check and see if.
Hold on. We have a problem, Houston.
Do your thing. Go start. Go start.
I don't know where my other...
I know where you.
Oh man, I think I'm gonna have to whip out the real blender.
That's moving. This is a problem.
And that's the new one. Well, apparently my hand blender has decided to shit the bed, just in time for me to show you what to do,
Or not.
or not show you what to do. I might have to get my blend tech over here and do that instead. Something stuck in it?
It's just.
That's right. I'm gonna go get that answer.
Got it.
You got it?
I mean, it's moving. I don't know if that's enough. We'll try.
Oh, see, this is what happens when you're doing this with no editing,
The head.
no editing.
There should be an extra head.
There's an extra base. The head was the thing that broke the last time. Okay, so my sandwich is looking beautiful. I'll just keep flipping it. Okay, so since I'm going to have to use the noisiest blender on the planet, but it blends like crazy, we're just gonna add it in with the ladle, because I'm not going to try and pick this pot up and dump it in. And like I said, you're going to have to do it in batches if you're using a blender. See, and I don't mind that my stick blender decided to not work for you today, simply because shit happens in the kitchen, you know? Happens to everyone. Okay. Just hit your blender. Blender instead of the stick blender. Mine has a vented cap, so it's going to allow steam to escape. If you do not have a vented cap, you should have a dish towel on the top, because it's going to try and shoot out. Okay? is perfectly blended. It's smooth as silk. And we're just gonna have to do it in batches, you guys. I'm not gonna do all of it because seriously, how many times do you need to see me do it? But I do wanna do enough for both John and I to have enough. And you'll notice, you see how dark the soup is coming out of the pot? And look at the inside of my blender.
And
It's kind of
your
orange
sister
color.
posted that they now have a red kitchen.
Because she didn't listen. What you do is you put it in and then start it. Oh my God. I was pretty clear.
Yeah, I'm just, hey Nancy, take out. Just that's all I've got to say at this point.
Okay. Oh! There I was trying to do two things at once. All right, so my basil soup looks, my tomato basil soup looks beautiful. I'm gonna move this out of the way. Because that's gonna get blended at a later time. I'm just gonna pop this up on here. And again, taste your soup. Mine doesn't need any salt. Mine tastes great just the way it is. All right. So, I like to put soup into latte cups. You could serve it however you like. And it really helps if you put the cream in. So there's two schools of thought, and if you read the blog that I posted within the event, you can either put the cream into your soup. Be sure you do not boil it after that, otherwise your soup will curdle. Or you can garnish the soup with the cream, and I'm going to show you what both of them look like. Okay, so take your soup, take your cream, and just pour until you see a little bit on the top. And you can make this as diluted as you like. I don't like too much in. Okay, so we're gonna garnish with just a little bit of pesto. We're gonna sprinkle some chiffonade basil on top. And we're gonna use some of that super fine parm that I got from the pizzeria that I didn't want to go to waste. Okay, so look, I don't know if you guys can see this. John might have to tilt the thing down so you can see it. So this is the one that I floated the cream onto, and this is the one where it's mixed in.
You're gonna have to
Angle?
or here. Just you keep them there, and I am going to move. Sorry guys for the view of the counter. So which one is which again,
Okay,
Leanne?
this is the one where I mixed the cream into the pot. This is the one where I just garnished it with the cream. You can see it's kind of floating on the top. Now we're gonna cut our sandwich.
Can you wait a second? I've got to put this back into the.
And so our sandwich, man, it's hot. Okay, our sandwich looks like that. It's just like gorgeous apples and cheese and bacon. So it's all these things that I really love all in one delicious sandwich. So it's really hot. It is so good, you guys. So that's all there is to it. You now know how to make homemade tomato soup that starts with a lot of stuff in cans, so you can make it whenever you want. So are there any questions before I let you go?
Remember, we're on a couple of second delay.
I know.
So I'm actually going to recommend that everybody sends questions in because you can answer them after the fact.
I can answer them after the fact. I do like to answer as many verbally as I can because once I take it down off of Facebook, the written questions are not visible because I do remove it from Facebook and put it on YouTube. So if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. If you're not following me on Facebook or Instagram, please do. You can subscribe to my blog, and there's actually the recipe, the written recipe for this soup is in the comment section, discussion section of the event. And the blog that I wrote originally wrote the recipe out is there. So you can subscribe at the bottom. I think there's a little subscribe link. Just send me your email. I don't share your information. And the only time you're going to hear from me is when I post something new. So I guess that's it. Sorry about your red kitchen, Nancy. Remember, put it in, then start it. And now I have to figure out what's wrong with mine. Okay. Thanks for watching. See you guys soon.